much. I think it's time to open up for the participation from the floor. I have many questions, but certainly I will forego with those. Now is your chance to engage the two leaders who have chaired, who have championed, who have shepherded ASEAN during their time and have collected a lot of experiences. I'm sure they have a lot of views for the future for us too. Please. Yes, Doctor, from Iloilo.
Right. Good afternoon, Kevin Villanueva. I'm a professor of international politics at the University of the Philippines, and I am one of the contributors to the volume. I would like to say thank you for both a robust and enlightening set of reflections from the Prime Minister and our former President. It would seem that the reflections, on the one hand, are much anchored on the past, and on the other hand, look forward into the future. Right. We've responded to communism, to the Cambodian crisis, to the financial crisis, and so on. So I think largely the achievement has been one of survival for ASEAN. And the 50 years call effectively for soul searching. I think this is what the 5 volumes have looked into. Right? The 50 years, I think, require some quantum leap. Do you think that that we are ready to move simply from survival to leadership? And if we are actually going to lead as a region, because I can understand why some regions look to ASEAN as a failure. This is because perhaps we're still looking for Asian solutions to Asian problems. Is it perhaps time to look at Asian solutions to global problems? Because I think it's difficult to keep the community entire and whole if we are not able to look beyond ourselves. How do you see, therefore, ASEAN leading if you agree? Specifically, do you see it moving away from national interests and bestowing or returning more mandate and power to the Secretariat? There is a philosophical question, but there is also an institutional question that I direct to both of you. And yes, Honorable Prime Minister, if we are to learn from Europe, I agree with you. And I think Jean Monnet himself said that if he were to begin again, he would begin with culture. So I raised that question to two national leaders. How much are we ready to give to ASEAN and to an ASEAN that looks to its peoples?
Thank you very much. A very, very sophisticated question requires a very, very deep analysis before you can answer. But you are up to this. Have we been too defensive and problem solving rather than providing leadership and be offensive into the future, anticipating and avoiding the problems rather than having to wait for the problems to come to us? Madam President?
Well, I think that when we accelerated the ASEAN community from the scheduled 2020 to 2015, that was not a defensive move. That was a leap into the global system when WTO exactly was faltering. So the developed countries were the ones moving backward, we were the ones moving forward. So at that point in time, we were leading the way to keeping global trade open. So I think we have not been just defensive. We have done leadership tasks when called for. And every year when I was president, I keep hearing all these new institutions, the architecture being expanded and expanded. Every year I would hear this, but we must make sure it's ASEAN-centered. So I could always feel that there was a desire to keep our leadership as ASEAN or even expand it, even vis-a-vis giants like China and the +3. So, well, as far as that's concerned, I don't think we have been too defensive in our moves. We have been leaders. We have even bigger aspirations to be leaders that might not necessarily be realistic, but suffice it to say that we have not been just defensive.
Thank you. Robin, sir, please.
It's a very difficult question because I think there are about at least 3-4 questions there, all in one. But let me try and answer it this way. The key sentence that I liked was about solutions and problems. And I agree that it's time to see our problems as global problems. Part of that is because we have a generation of people who are now growing up with global values and global problems. Indeed, one of the excuses that we've always cited about the lack of progress is diversity. You were guilty of that this morning several times. That's not for the younger generation. A Thai has every aspiration to get a good job in Singapore, a Malaysian person, but the governments are still not thinking along those lines. I find it incredible that a country like Thailand, which has suffered from labor shortage now for at least 6-7 years, and we have guest workers from Myanmar, probably about 5 million of them, but we pretend that it's only about 1 million. We want to register them all. Isn't that crazy? Isn't ASEAN going to be about a community where people can move across borders? There are people seeking jobs. There's a country that's looking for labor. And yet there is no joint or ASEAN solution to that problem. So I think we have to take a global perspective, but keep what you call the ASEAN solutions because we can do things differently. And if you ask, are we ready for it? Do we have to take a quantum leap? All I can say is, even if we aim to be leaders, we could end up just surviving. But if we aim just for survival, I'm not sure we will. So if we're not ready for it, make sure we get ready. Readiness is not something that's going to be given to you from somewhere. And I think we have to begin that task of giving voice to people who become more and more global in their concerns, in their livelihoods, but still see all the constraints of the national borders and expect something to change to allow them the full benefits of opportunities and potential from true integration.
Thank you. Next question, please. Yes. The gentleman.
Hello, thank you. I'm Gus Miklat again.
Yes.
Thank you for those two robust presentations and to Prime Minister Abishit for referring to our earlier intervention this morning. First, some good news about the ASEAN way on civil society's level. We talk about the ASEAN way among policymakers, but there's also an ASEAN way among civil society. And we don't have problems about reaching consensus, decision-making, etc. So I'm wondering where that ASEAN way came about. when the peoples of ASEAN can easily come together, can easily decide among themselves, can easily launch joint actions, etc., etc. I've heard Madam President say something about media and social. That's a very particular response of how to involve civil society into the processes of ASEAN. But I'm very curious, Prime Minister Abishit, what concretely are you thinking of how to get more participation from civil society in the processes of ASEAN? What specific mechanisms, for example, are you thinking if we were to pick your brains, and you too, Madam President, beyond the social media suggestion that you had? And I wish I were addressing you, not as former leaders of ASEAN, but as current leaders of ASEAN, so you could really implement these suggestions that we would be hearing from you. Thank you.
You might have one future one, but you have served your term, Madam. I don't think you can come back.
No.
So, Madam, you want to go first?
Well, how do you engage civil society more in ASEAN? I think they have to want to be engaged more in ASEAN. So there are civil society organizations that are interested in ASEAN, and we should engage them. But for those that are not interested, I think we should go straight to the people, because there's media that helps us now go to the people, not the traditional media, but the social media.
Thank you. Abishit?
Well, first of all, I'm glad to hear the good news. And it even highlights the fact that clearly for so long, we feel that when people talk about ASEAN and the ASEAN way, they're still focused on leaders, they're still focused on governments, and the civil society hasn't been able to project their role in all of this. Now, how can we engage them more? Well, for one thing, I think you have to have greater relevance in what you do to people's lives. Then they will naturally be keen to participate more. And actually referring to one of the earlier questions, we now have to, in a way, I think, change direction. Yesterday I found out, Madam President kindly hosted dinner for me, that this year, the Philippines have had to hold 280-something ASEAN meetings.
We're 245th this meeting now.
This is 245th meeting this year. There are now more ASEAN meetings than working days in a year. All right? I think we need less of this. And we don't want to repeat the mistake of the European Union of having a bloated Brussels bureaucracy. What we need more is perhaps not number of projects, maybe even less projects, but projects that can somehow relate to people, create some kind of identity. You know, I was very impressed with the conclusion from the meeting of editors yesterday, right? Where you suggested what you see as small projects, but there will be projects that will be very tangible and relevant to ordinary people's lives. Once you do that, there will be a natural desire on the part of the people to own the ASEAN project, to be part of the ASEAN project. You know, you can't just say, let's invite more people or try to meet more people, but if you make your work more relevant to them, you don't need to invite them, they'll come to you.
All right. I've been told that time is up and the President of the Republic may be coming, but one question is up and then we'll wrap it up, please.
Right, time is
Yeah,
up.
yeah.
2 minutes.
Thank you, Dr. Surin. I'll make this very quick. Augustine, Channel News Asia. I hope all of you watch movies. And the Brad Pitt World War Z movie is based on this very loose theory of the 10th man syndrome. It means in a group of 10, one person goes out and is the devil's advocate. I mean, even in the Vatican, when you have a candidate for sainthood, there is always one person who plays that role. I see both of you, Mr. Abishit, Mrs. Arroyo, as elders, not a reflection of age, but in terms of wisdom. If both of you, on this spot, since we're pressed for time, make one strong policy recommendation or recommendation that the ASEAN leadership should seriously consider, be the 10th man syndrome, be that brave person he's outside what we consider the groupthink, and make that bold recommendation. And Mrs. Arroyo, you mentioned Duterte administration many times. I listened to the president's speech. I'm probably one of the few people who listened to his live speech last night from Pasay City. I listened to Mr. Duterte very, very carefully, right down to the shoes in Marikina. So I really implore you to come up with something concrete that you think the leadership should consider. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Augustine.
Dr. Surin.
Abishit first, please.
Well, this is very difficult. Two quick things. Number one, is it time to have a forum where there are representatives from people who can come in and join the ASEAN process? At the moment, when we prepare for summits, when we prepare for meetings, it's all through the bureaucratic channels. Is it time to have a separate track where we invite representatives of people and each country can decide how they would want to do that, to be almost like a group that suggests what kind of agenda they would want for ASEAN? And the second thing is, as I said up there, maybe if we did have an ASEAN minister in all the 10 countries, we'll have somebody who will be accountable for the ASEAN project to the people, and there will be pressure and there will be thoughts and there will be reflections expressed to those ministers so that they make a better connection with the people.
Madam President, final words, please.
Well, I mentioned it already in my speech. I talked about our challenge to look after one another in terms of the economy, in terms of security, in terms of social justice. And so we have to look after one another on economic development. Perhaps I should add, we should make sure that the development is not on the backs of the poor. And that brings us to the social justice portion there. And as far as security is concerned and social justice, I said that we should graduate from those declarations to something more concrete. Like, for instance, in the case of the rights of migrant workers, then we should go to the instrument already to be able to carry it out. So we have to implement the declarations, the convention, and the codes that we have already issued.
Thank you, ma'am. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, we wish that we could go on and draw upon your collective wisdoms of the experiences that you have led ASEAN and led very, very successfully. But time is up. I would just say this, that the take-home message from both of you is that engage more people and be prepared for relevant projects and programs for people. At the end of this year, ASEAN will once again demonstrate its drawing power, its convening power. 10 members, 10 of the dialogue partners, complete 10, will be coming to join the ASEAN leaders. 2 will be as guests of the host. The other 8 would be as members of the EAS East Asia Summit. While ASEAN is still very much appealing and attractive to the world, we still have time to mend our way, to open up and to make sure that this is an effective regional organization as we have impressed the world for the last 50 years. But the next 50 years will be harder. And the secret for that is not just the enlightened leaders that you have seen here, but certainly a more active, more engaged citizenship into the process and the procedures of ASEAN. So there's a dichotomy there. There's two yang and yin there. Enlightened leadership, engage and awaken and aware people. I think it's a matter of chicken and egg. But since it has been a leader-driven diplomats projects and diplomats program in the past, now it is time to infuse it with more energy, with more enthusiasm, with more relevancy by opening up more to the people. I think that's the message from the two leaders. Thank you very, very much, ma'am. And we owe them our gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you, Her Excellency President Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo, His Excellency former Prime Minister Vejjajiva, and Dr. Pitsuwan for the substantive discussion. To receive the ASEAN at 50 books, we'd like to request Ambassador Buen Suceso to hand the ASEAN at 50 books to Dr. Pitsuwan.
So we shall just put it here.
Apparently it's 5 kilograms.
Really?
Hmm.
You missed
Madam?
your copy just now, so here's your copy.
Thank you very much.
this
This one
one
is
is for
this one is for the moderator, ma'am. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Look at that. Thank you. Yeah.
This time, may I call on His Excellency Ong Keng Yong to hand the ASEAN at 50 book volumes to former Prime Minister to the Kingdom of Thailand, His Excellency Abishit Vejjajiva.
Thank you.
To receive the ASEAN at 50 books, may I call on Professor Nishimura to hand the books to former President of the Republic of the Philippines, Her Excellency Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo. May I kindly remind everyone to please stay on your seats during the photo opportunity and avoid going to the front. Thank you.